When you think about art and the church, historically, it's just incredible, right? Like the Sistine Chapel, Bach, those amazing hymns.
Absolutely monumental stuff. For centuries, the church was really this powerhouse of artistic creation.
It really was. Which, makes you wonder about today. What's the picture now?
And that's exactly what we're diving into. We're looking at this article by David Ryan Gutierrez, 5 Ways the Church Can Make Great Art Again. It's from back in 2014, but still feels relevant.
Super relevant. So our mission here, for everyone listening, is to really dig into what Gutierrez is saying. Why does he think maybe things have shifted artistically in the church?
And crucially, what are his ideas for sort of jump-starting that creativity again?
Yeah, practical steps. And look, whether you've got personal experience with art in church, or maybe you just feel like something's missing sometimes in terms of creative energy and communities, this should give you some interesting things to think about, about culture, creativity, community. It might connect with stuff you've seen elsewhere too.
Definitely. Gutierrez has a very specific viewpoint, and we want to unpack that, see what makes sense, what challenges us.
Okay, so let's jump into his first point. He starts by saying we need to, quote, embrace the crazy beauty of artists.
Right. And he uses that analogy, you've probably heard it attributed to different people about dancers.
Oh, yeah, the idea that people think dancers are crazy if they can't hear the music the dancers are moving to.
Exactly. And Gutierrez applies it by suggesting that maybe, just maybe, a focus on the normal has made some folks creatively deaf.
Creatively deaf. Interesting way to put it. Like, they can't perceive the artist's unique rhythm or vision.
Precisely. They might just dismiss it as, well, crazy.
But he reframes that crazy. He calls it beautiful, innocent, raw, unfiltered, and importantly, absolutely necessary.
Which gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? That unconventional view, seeing things differently. That's where the breakthroughs often happen.
But he also acknowledges artists can be tricky to work with sometimes, right? Because they feel things deeply.
Yeah, he links it to them more in tune with their emotional spectrum. It's that heightened sensitivity. It can make their process seem, I don't know, intense or unpredictable to others.
But that's also their strength, isn't it? He argues they give language and vision to our deepest emotions. They help us access feelings we might not even know how to name ourselves.
Pushing us beyond our own limited emotional bandwidth, as he puts it.
Yeah. Think about art that's really moved you. Often it came from someone seeing or feeling something in a way you hadn't considered.
So this call to welcome artistic insanity, it's really about making space for that potentially transformative perspective.
And the hope, Gutierrez says, is that it could make our souls dancing again, which is a lovely thought. Okay, so appreciate the artist's unique view. But then comes the practical bit, point 2. Pay for great art.
Yes, the money question. He really challenges the assumption, which is pretty common in church settings, that artists should just contribute their work for free.
Right, like it's just part of their offering. He gets the idea of gifts and sacrifices, but questions if it's always applied fairly to artists.
And he makes this really interesting parallel. He points to 1 Timothy in the Bible about paying ministers or elders for their work.
So he's basically asking, if artists are ministering through their creativity, contributing something valuable to the community's spiritual life, shouldn't they also be compensated fairly?
It definitely makes you pause and think about how different contributions are valued, materially.
Yeah, because churches often take collections for visiting speakers or missionaries, right?
Right. But for artists, often the payment is just seen as like exposure or the opportunity to share their gifts.
Which Gutierrez implies might not be enough. He throws out these questions like, what if more churches had artists in residence?
Or what if the first question we asked artists wasn't how can you serve us, but how can we fund your creations?
Wow, yeah, that completely flips the script on how artists are often approached.
It really does. It shifts the view from art as just a service to art as something valuable that needs actual investment, like other church ministries.
And his conclusion on this point is pretty blunt. Great art costs the artist. The least we can do is compensate them. Makes sense.
Okay, so from paying artists, he moves to point 3. Demand a higher standard.
Right, and this isn't about being mean or overly critical. It's about excellence. He tells that great story about Jamie Foxx and Ray Charles.
Oh, I love that one. Fox is playing piano, and Ray Charles just stops him and says,
Now, what'd you do that for? You know where the right notes are. Just hit the right ones.
Yeah, so direct. But it gets at that idea of striving for technical skill, for, hitting the right notes.
And Gutierrez knows art is subjective, taste varies. But he also says, look, some things are just objectively not good yet.
Like playing out a tune or a really weak performance or maybe writing that just doesn't connect. It's not just opinion at that point.
Exactly, and he worries that the church's desire to be supportive and encouraging, which is obviously good.
Can sometimes get in the way of pushing for objectively good art. Like, we praise everything, maybe.
Yeah, and that might not actually help the artist grow. So he says we need to see criticism and critique as tools for getting better.
Not as a tax.
Yeah.
Moving beyond just blindly encouraging our artists, as he puts it.
The goal isn't to shut people down, it's to help them aspire to the best version of themselves.
Which might mean, sometimes, acknowledging that something isn't quite ready for, say, the main Sunday service. Having discernment.
It comes back to Ray Charles, doesn't it? We need to be willing to hit the right notes, aiming for quality.
Okay, so quality's key. Then comes point 4, which I think might hit home for a lot of people. Refuse mimicry.
Ah, the imitation game. This is about originality, right? Or the lack thereof sometimes.
Yeah, he specifically points to worship music, where often teams are just using chord charts, doing covers, basically karaokeing popular songs.
And look, he says some teams do that really well. It can be moving, but...
But, he argues, it's wholly uncreative in itself. It's not generating anything new.
And his point is, if the church wants to be a birthplace for creativity, it has to push back against just copying.
He concedes that imitation can be flattering, sure, but if that's where it stops.
He says it borders on insult, because it implies we can't create something original ourselves.
And it's easy, right? Copying is safer, less work sometimes.
For sure. But Gutierrez argues with so many
new songs to write, new sermons to speak, and new pieces to perform. Why would we ever settle for the art that's already been created?
Oof, yeah. That really makes you think about the value we place on originality versus familiarity.
Okay, brings us to the 5th and final point, which feels like maybe the toughest one. Take risks.
This is about being bold, basically. Stepping out.
He uses this really strong image standing on the front lines of a revolution. He says creative leaders might get pushback.
People might call them crazy, irreverent, and even sacrilegious just for trying something new or different.
Yeah, because pushing boundaries is inherently risky. You might upset the status quo.
And he's very upfront about failure. He says, and we will likely fail. A lot.
Which is kind of refreshing to hear acknowledged so openly.
It is. But the key is resilience. But that's when we get up and keep creating. Don't let the fear of failure paralyze you.
He believes art that's only aiming for safe success, for guaranteed approval, it just won't ever be truly great. It won't reach its potential.
He calls great art an investment of self and soul. It requires vulnerability.
And he connected to investing, higher risk, potentially greater reward.
And for him, using art to connect people to the story of Christ. Well, that's the most risky endeavor of all.
Why? Because the stakes are so high. The potential impact is huge.
Exactly. But the ultimate reward, he says, is inspiring creation to return to its creator. That's the big prize.
Which leads to his final, very grand call to action. Let's go build some new cathedrals.
Wow, yeah. Not literal cathedrals, maybe, but creating things with that kind of vision and significance. It's inspiring.
Definitely. So just to recap the 5 ways Gutierrez outlined.
Okay, yeah. First, embrace the unique, sometimes crazy perspective of artists.
Second, value their work enough to actually pay for it.
Third, demand a high standard. Encourage growth through honest critique, not just blind praise.
Fourth, refuse mimicry. Strive for originality. Don't just copy what's already out there.
And fifth, be willing to take creative risks, even if it means failing sometimes.
And listening back, these points, they really offer a framework that goes beyond just the church, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. For anyone listening, these ideas about nurturing creativity, supporting artists, aiming for excellence, valuing originality, taking risks, they apply in so many areas, right? Any community, any field that involves creative work.
Yeah, it's a lens for thinking about how we foster genuinely impactful creation anywhere.
Which leads to maybe one last thought to leave everyone with. Considering, the incredible artistic legacy the church has had historically, what kind of cultural impact could we see today if these principles, valuing artists, demanding quality, encouraging originality, taking risks, were really embraced more widely, not just in churches, but maybe across different creative communities.
That's a big question. What kind of new cathedrals make it built?
Exactly. And maybe more personally for our listeners, how might your experience of art and community be enriched if that kind of creative energy was more present? Something to chew on, definitely.